Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news and rumor video here to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at a couple of injury updates, some recalls from reassignments, a couple of very interesting pieces of news, and we've got some trade rumors, some very interesting ones, involving the Canucks, the Rangers, the Hurricanes, and the St. Louis Blues. We'll touch on all of these coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we get into this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. And don't forget to stay tuned for videos coming out in the very near future. And just to let you guys know, I'm sorry for any background noise. Plus I am starting to get sick, so if I sound a little stuffy, I do apologize for that. But in today's video, we got very interesting when we're talking about a couple of very interesting pieces of news, plus a couple of trade rumors. So I'm going to start off looking at some injury updates because since the last video, there have not been any signings. So we'll start with some of the injury updates. Mason McTavish, who missed Friday's game with upper body injury and is out day to day. He also missed Wednesday's game, so it doesn't seem like it's going to be a long-term injury, but he has missed the last couple of games, so not great news there for Mason McTavish. Jordan Harris, who had been out since October with a fractured ankle, was assigned to the AHL on a conditioning stint, so that could mean that Harris is nearing a return, which would be a big boost to the Bruins D-core, as adding Harris would be fantastic news for Boston. Jacob Bryson, who suffered an upper body injury, was placed on injury reserve, so it seems like he's going to miss at least the next 2 games after the IR placement, so bad blow to Sabres D-core as they lose Bryson. Jonathan Huberdeau, who missed 1 game with a lower body injury, returned to game action on Friday, so not too bad there, as Huberdeau's a really decent middle 6 forward. Frank Nazar, who missed just over a month after taking a puck to the face, was active off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Thursday, so a big boost there for the Hawks, as young superstar Frank Nazar is going to be returning to the game action. Mason Marchment, who missed 8 games with upper body injury, was active off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Thursday for the Jackets. While Dinton Matejczyk, who's already missed a week and a half of game action with upper body injury, was placed on injury reserve to make room for the activation of Mason Marchment, so hopefully Matejczyk gets back soon, but good to see that Marchment is back for the Jackets. Joel Eriksson and Marcus Johansson have both recovered from their respective injuries and returned to game action on Thursday, so the Wild were without quite a bit of their players, so getting both those guys back is a big boost for the Minnesota Wild's forward group. Bo Horvat, who missed 3 weeks with a lower body injury, is scheduled to return later today for the New York Islanders. So really good news there, as Bo Horvat's a really big piece of the New York Islanders team. So it's good to see that the Islanders will have him back. While Ryan Pulock is out day to day with a upper body injury and could miss Saturday's game because of it. So not great news there. Hopefully Pulock does play, but he is currently out with an upper body injury, and hopefully it's not a severe injury. So very interesting note there. David Perron underwent surgery for a sports hernia and is going to be out 5 to 7 weeks for the Ottawa Senators. A bad blow there. Perron's a really good veteran on that Senators forward group, so seeing him be out for the next 5 to 7 weeks, probably until sometime in March, is a bad blow there for the Sens. Erik Karlsson, who missed a few games with undisclosed injury, was activated off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Thursday. Big boost for the Penguins to get their superstar defenseman Erik Karlsson back into the lineup. Ben Meyers missed Friday's game with a lower body injury and is out week to week, so it sounds like he's going to miss at least a couple of weeks, so not great news there, as Myers has actually been a pretty decent 4th liner for the Seattle Kraken. Matej Joseph, who had been out just over a week with an elbow injury, was active off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Friday. While Oscar Sundqvist, who had been out a few games with an ankle laceration, was placed on injury reserve. So the Sundqvist placement on injury reserve is just to create space to activate Joseph, and Sundqvist is apparently going to be out indefinitely. It's not great news there, but it's good to see that Joseph returned after missing a couple of weeks with a injury and also being healthy scratched. Philip Hedl, who missed over 3 months with a head injury, was active off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Friday. So a big boost there for the Canucks. Hopefully he doesn't get any more concussions throughout the next little bit of his career, because he's been dealing with them a lot over his career. But it's a big boost for the Canucks to see Philip Hedl's return to game action. Scott Sabourin, who missed 3 weeks with undisclosed injury, was active off of injury reserve and sent to the minors. He's been called up on occasions this year to provide some extra toughness into the Bolts lineup, but at this point I don't really need him at the NHL level, so he's going to go get some reps at the AHL level. And Anthony Stolarz missed over 2 months with a upper body injury, was active with a long-term injury reserve and returned to game action on Friday. So it was very interesting out there. He returned in the minor return game against the Vegas Golden Knights. He didn't look overly great, like he looked rusty as you'd expect. A game in which the Vegas Golden Knights helped Marner take down his old team 6-3, which was, I think, very impressive. Vegas completely came out prepared, and I'm happy as a Vegas Golden Knights fan that they did want to gain that win, but you could argue that maybe they put in Stolarz a little bit too early. So very interesting note there, but Stolarz is now back to being healthy. healthy after missing 2 months, and he got back into game action on Friday. So very interesting note there. But some very interesting updates when it comes to some injury updates. Going on to some recalls and reassignments. When it comes to some recalls, Zach Jones was recalled in Buffalo because of the Bryson injury. Isaiah George was recalled by the New York Islanders probably because of the Pulak injury. Melanson was recalled by the Seattle Kraken because he actually had a pretty good stint the last time he was called up, and also the Van Mayer's injury. Holiday was recalled by Ottawa because of the Perron injury, and Thornton was recalled by Toronto because they have some injuries on the blue line, so very interesting note there. While Hunter Haight and Ben Jones in Minnesota were reassigned to the AHL affiliates due to the fact that Johansson and Eriksson are now back into game action. Chernyshov was sent down by the San Jose Sharks because they do have a couple more healthy bodies up front. They have open spots right now. Jacob Megna was reassigned by the Vegas Golden Knights due to the fact, which we'll get to in a second, of someone being placed on their roster. And then both Zhilkin and Phillips were reassigned by the Winnipeg Jets, and I think the Jets are also getting a little more healthier. So very interesting note there, but some very interesting recalls and reassignments, and we'll see how these teams do being called up to the NHL and how they do after being sent back down to the AHL. So very interesting note there. There were no waiver updates in our past couple of days. We don't have any other waiver updates since our last video, so nothing to talk about there. We're going to talk about a couple of quick small pieces of news here first, and then we'll go over to the trade rumors. So first, when it comes to potential extensions for Kiefer Sherwood in San Jose and Bobby McMann in Toronto, McMann is a UFA. I think he's like a young UFA. I think he's only like 27, 28 years old. So he's going to be a first-time UFA. Apparently, the Leafs really do want to keep him. McMahon's having himself a pretty decent season. So because of all of that, they really do want to try and extend him. I'm not sure what an extension would look like. Like, I'm thinking maybe like a 4 to 5 year deal would be around like the $4-ish million range on an AAV, maybe a little bit more, like the cap is going up. So we shall wait and see on that. No guarantees that anything's close between McMahon and the Toronto Maple Leafs, but there is interest from the Maple Leafs to try and sign McMahon to an extension to keep him in the Leafs' top 9. So we shall wait and see if that's something that comes to fruition in the next couple of weeks. When it comes to a Sherwood extension, he was literally just acquired from the Vancouver Canucks by the San Jose Sharks. Apparently they have had their first initial meetings about a contract extension, and they're still very far apart on the contract, sort of the same thing as the Canucks were. Apparently, Kiefer Sherwood's management does think that he can get around $30 million on a new contract, which would be like a 5-year deal with a $6 million AAV, or a 6-year deal with a $5 million AAV, or something around that. I think that's a little bit too expensive for Sherwood and what he brings. Like, he's a decent player. He's really come alive over the past couple of years, but he's still more of a bottom 6 checking for it. I don't think, even with the cap going up, you're paying bottom 6 players $5 to $6 million. I think in a perfect world, he's probably like a 4x4 sort of player. So very interesting note there, but we'll have to wait and see if something does happen in the very near future. But apparently the Sharks and Sherwood have had preliminary contract extension talks, and they're still very far apart on the deal, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Next, going over to the New York Islanders AHL affiliates in Bridgeport. The Bridgeport Islanders, they've announced, are moving, and as of next year will be in Hamilton. So Hamilton, I think, recently just lost a junior team. I think it was in the OHL, so they're now going to get another lower-end hockey team back, and that's with the AHL affiliates for the New York Islanders. So I'm not sure if they'll change their name or anything, or their logos and things like that, but the Bridgeport Islanders are indeed moving, and as of next year will be in Hamilton. So very interesting note there for the New York Islanders AHL affiliates. So very interesting note there. And yesterday in that Marner game, which was very, very interesting and made me very happy as a Vegas Golden Knights fan, another very interesting aspect of it was Rasmus Andersson finally made his Golden Knights debut last night, which was very interesting out there. He's had some trouble with immigration and getting a work visa, which a lot of players who go from Canada to the States usually do have problems with. So because they're playing in Canada, Anderson made his NHL debut. I think he's able to go back to Vegas now and play with the Golden Knights, so we'll see about that. But he had a pretty decent debut, had a couple of shots, had an assist, played over 20 minutes, and helped Vegas get the win. So very interesting note there, but Rasmus Andersson is now played with the Vegas Golden Knights. So very interesting note there. Those are all the news updates from the past couple of days. Last year, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So when it comes to some trade rumors, we've got some very interesting trade rumors here to talk about. We're going to start off with the Vancouver Canucks. Kevin Weeks put out a tweet yesterday saying a couple of interesting teams have some major interest in Evander Kane. According to his recent tweet, he did say that the Colorado Avalanche and Dallas Stars, two of the best teams in the league and two of the best teams in the Central Division, have some major interest in bringing in Evander Kane. Now, Kane is a very interesting one. He was acquired in the offseason from the Edmonton Oilers. He knows how to lay a body. He's not shy of the physicality side of hockey. He can put up some decent depth scoring, but he's also been known to take some bad penalties at inopportune times. So he's not the greatest player in the world to add, but to add some more physicality in the bottom six, I could see some playoff-bound teams really want to add him. If the Canucks were to retain half of his salary, that would bump his cap hit down to around 2.5, 2.6 million, which I think would make it a lot more appetizing for a lot of teams. I've seen some people say maybe if everything goes right and there was enough of a market, the Canucks get a second round pick for Kane, but most likely it's probably going to be like a third round pick, which would still be quite good value given the fact they gave up a fourth round pick in the offseason to get Kane from the Edmonton Oilers. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Like, there's probably a couple other teams out there too, I would think, who do have some cap space, who would love to add Kane into their bottom six. But he's a very unique player where he's not afraid to lay the body, but he's also taking inopportune penalties. So a very interesting note there, but the Avalanche and the Stars apparently do have some interest in Canucks rough and tumble forward Evander Kane. So we should wait and see if that winds up coming to fruition in the very near future, but keep an eye on the Avs and Stars when it comes to Evander Kane. Next two updates here are both with the Carolina Hurricanes, and they've been in the rumor mill a lot. So we're going to start off really quickly here with the Kotkaniemi update. The Canes are actively shopping Kotkaniemi to try and find some sort of an upgrade. Apparently, Dave Panoa did link one team to Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and that is the Minnesota Wild, which makes sense. The Wild don't have the greatest of center groups, but he says that Kotkaniemi is not their first option. We heard them recently be linked to a guy like Vincent Trocheck. There's probably a couple other guys like a Braden Shen or Ryan O'Reilly that would have some major interest in. Kotkaniemi is probably like a B or C level plan. So like I think they want to try and go after someone with a little bit more top six potential at this current point in time before they go and try and go after Kotkaniemi. But apparently the Wild do have some level of interest in trying to acquire Jesperi Kotkaniemi. So that's a situation we're going to have to watch out for. And with all of the speculation talking, I think Kotkaniemi could very likely get moved before this year's trade deadline, even though he's got a little bit of a longer term contract. I think with the amount of teams needing centers, even though he's not the greatest of center, I think even if a team was to utilize him as like a 3C, I think there would be some teams who have some interest. So I'll have to wait and see on that. Now the bigger thing that the panel was talking about is Alexander Nikishin. Now Nikishin is a young prospect blue liner. He came over, I think it was from college or from Europe or something like that last year. At the end of the season, played a couple of games with the Hurricanes. Didn't look totally out of place. He was a rookie this year, and he has been great. He's had to have some added minutes because of injuries to guys like Slavin and Gostisbehere, and he's looked phenomenal for the Carolina Hurricanes. They have a really stud young top four blue liner in Alexander Nikishin, who's also not afraid to lay the body at times. So very interesting note there. But apparently, according to Pagnotta, they would be open to moving Nikishin for the right deal. Now, I'd be really wary about that if I was a Canes fan. I think they have a really good top four, top pair defenseman in Nikishin. I personally would not move him. I think even if it was to get them like some sort of major forward upgrade, I think they should keep Nikishin because he is a really solid defensive prospect. But apparently, according to Pagnotta, if it was to get them a star caliber forward upgrade, they would be open to listening on Nikishin. So that's a very interesting concept, something I'll be very scared if I was a Canes fan, because I do think Nikishin, if he was to get traded, could thrive and blossom in another team's organization. So I think I'll be very cautious if I was a Canes fan, and I would definitely try and move other prospects before a guy like Nikishin, but apparently they are open to moving Nikishin for the right deal. So very interesting out there. And then also when it comes to the Canes, we'll go over to the St. Louis Blues. Pagnotta said that if they do want to move Nikishin, a sort of caliber player that would be willing to part with him for would be Robert Thomas in St. Louis. They do have some major interest in Robert Thomas. Now, as much as they have been linked to moving Kotkaniemi, one of their big holes on their team has been a center. They don't have the greatest center groups. So, I mean, they've been linked to Trocheck. They've been linked to Elias Pettersson. They've been linked to, I think, Braden Shen as well. Like, they have a lot of interest in some of these top-end centers to try and really improve that team, because that's really their one hole on this team. And apparently, if a guy like Robert Thomas is available, which is apparently they are listening on, they would be open to moving Alexander Nikishin for a type of player like that. So very interesting note there. Apparently there's also been some talk that if the Blues were to trade a guy like Robert Thomas or John Kyra, they want a pretty good young defensive prospect in return, which would be Nikishin. So maybe that's a trade that could happen later on, like a Robert Thomas to Carolina for a package that includes Nikishin. That's a possibility. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee by any means, but still very interesting out there that the Canes are listening in on Nikishin. They do have some interest in Robert Thomas. That could be a trade that we could see. If not Robert Thomas, there's probably a couple of other star-studded forward players that the Canes could have some interest in, but still, I'd be very wary if I was to trade Nikishin. So I'll have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Nikishin. Kotkaniemi and Thomas as potential trade options leading up to the trade deadline, so I'll have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to the New York Rangers and the Seattle Kraken. Now, we've talked about these two teams in recent videos. We talked about Seattle Kraken in our last video about how they might be open to making some sort of a Shane Wright trade. And we talked about the Rangers after they put out the letter saying that they're going through some sort of a retool, veterans will get moved out, and we've talked about a whole bunch of players on the New York Rangers team, Panarin, Trocheck, Soucy, and just to name a few. But another guy we talked about with the New York Rangers is Wright-Lafreniere. Now, according to Elliot Friedman on his recent 32 Thoughts podcast, he wonders if the Kraken and Rangers could do some sort of a one-for-one swap of Shane Wright and Wright-Lafreniere. Now, I'm not exactly sure if that would be quite a good one-for-one trade. Wright, I do think, has really good potential, but I think with where they are right now, the Rangers might ask for something else along with Wright. Like, I think it'd probably be Wright and maybe like a draft pick or something. But this is a very interesting potential trade option that we could see leading up to the trade deadline. Like, Lafreniere needs a fresh start. There's been a lot of talk about him getting a fresh start somewhere else. He's making $7+ million. He's got, I think, 5 or 6 years left on his deal. It's just not working on the Rangers organization. He needs a spot where he could be a top 6 forward and potentially be more power forward that we're all hoping him to be when he was taken first overall. Well, for Wright, he's also not doing overly good in his current position. He's getting bottom 6 minutes as like a third or fourth line center. He's not been getting a whole bunch of playing time. And in the Rangers organization, they could probably use a couple of centers, especially if they move Vincent Trocheck. So, is this a possible trade? I could see it happen. Like, I think the Kraken would most likely want someone who's a little bit more established at scoring goals. Like, Lafreniere has been a decent goal scorer throughout his career, but I'm not sure if he's on the level of what the Seattle Kraken really want, like an elite level goal scorer. But he's on the younger side of things. He's signed for a long term, and he's more of a power forward type guy, something that the Seattle Kraken don't really have. Put him on the top 6. Maybe they could get similar results to what they've gone with Kaapo Kakko last year when they traded for him from the New York Rangers. Like, that would be a very interesting concept. I think it could help both teams. Like, if Wright gets more playing time, it could see him blossom to like a really solid second line two-way center for the Rangers, and it could see the Kraken really rejuvenate Lafreniere to be like a solid 60 to 70 point player, maybe a guy who can score at his peak like 30-35 goals. That could be an interesting swap for the Rangers and the Kraken. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee. I do think a one-for-one swap is very unlikely, because I think the Rangers would probably ask for maybe one thing more, but it is a very interesting concept that we could see at some point in the very near future. So I have to wait and see on that. But that was what I'm going to talk about for today. I'll let you guys thoughts. Could we see a Rangers Kraken swap of Shane Wright for Wright-Lafreniere? Do the Canes move off of Alexander Nikishin? Could they try and go after Robert Thomas? And do the Wild look at Jesperi Kotkaniemi as a trade option? And do you think we could see the Avalanche or the Stars trade for Evander Kane? Definitely thoughts on all of that, plus all the news, injuries from our past couple of days. That's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you're listening, to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to with all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for videos coming in the very near future. Also, blogs, news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. Can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.